Reggie, please, I am begging you, please help me. Help your little sister.
Oh, Ella, I'm sorry, but I can't.
Harriet, please help me with a little cash. I haven't eaten in a while and I am hungry.
What do you do when the people you helped at their lowest turn their backs against you when you need them the most? This is a story of how a family milked their sister and left her to suffer. The hospital room smelled of antiseptic and quiet desperation. Ella James lay propped against two thin pillows, her skin dull under the fluorescent light that hummed above her like a prayer no one believed in anymore. A drip fed slowly into her left arm. The monitor beside her beeped in steady, indifferent rhythm, the only sound that had kept her company for the past 11 hours. Outside the window, Lagos moved in its usual furious pace. Motorbikes weaved between buses, traders called out prices. The city did not pause for anyone, and it certainly would not pause for her. She had been admitted 3 days ago. A collapse in her home office, her assistant finding her slumped over her desk, face pressed against a quarterly report that had been open for weeks. The doctors called it severe exhaustion compounded by acute stress. Her body, they said, had simply refused to carry any more. The diagnosis had not surprised her. What surprised her was the silence. She had 8 contacts saved under the word family in her phone. She had called all of them from the hospital bed the night of her admission, her voice thin and unfamiliar even to herself. She had said the words she had never said before, not in 36 years of being the strong one, the capable one, the one everyone leaned on. She had said, "I need help." It was now the 3rd day. Not one of them had come. Her assistant, Demi, had stayed the first night, sleeping upright in the plastic chair in the corner, refusing to leave until Ella had physically ordered her out. Her doctor, a brisk but kind woman named Dr. Adeyemi, checked in every morning with a warmth that felt almost conspiratorial, as if she too understood that the patient in bed 7 had no visitors, no one else. Ella stared at the ceiling and counted the tiles the way she used to count numbers in spreadsheets, methodically, looking for patterns in things that held no pattern at all. Her phone lay face down on the bedside table. She had stopped checking it this morning. There was nothing to check. The strange thing was that she was not weeping. She had expected to weep. She had imagined, in the abstract way one imagines catastrophes before they arrive, that the moment she fully understood her aloneness, she would cry in a way that cracked something open in her chest. Instead, she felt something quieter and far more devastating, a slow, settling clarity, like sediment finally reaching the bottom of a glass of water. She was 36 years old. She had built a consulting firm that employed 42 people. She had bought a house at 31, paid off the mortgage at 34. She had given. God, how she had given, until the act of giving felt less like generosity and more like breathing, automatic, expected, unremarkable. And here she was, alone in a hospital room. Her family knew, and they had not come. So this is what it feels like, she thought, to finally see the truth. She closed her eyes and let the monitor beep her into a restless sleep. And as she drifted, her mind did what minds do in the stillness of crisis. It went backwards, all the way back to the beginning, to understand how on earth she had arrived at this quiet, devastating room. Ella had always been the last born of 4, last to be served at the dinner table, last considered in any family decision, yet somehow always first expected to produce results. It was a peculiar position, invisible and indispensable at once. Her mother, Gloria James, was a woman made of expectations and sighs. She had married a civil servant, raised 4 children in a house where money was always mentioned and never quite enough, and she had lived long enough to see her youngest daughter become the family's greatest asset and most reliable ATM. Her eldest sibling was Reginald, Reggie to everyone, 51 now, broad-shouldered and silver-tongued, a man who had spent 3 decades beginning ventures and blaming their failure on circumstances. There had been the printing business, then the real estate consultancy that consulted no one and sold nothing, then the school he was going to open, the hotel he was going to build, the connection he was going to leverage. Reggie moved through life with the confidence of a man perpetually on the verge of a breakthrough and the neediness of one who never actually broke through. Next came Harriet, 48, divorced twice, with 3 children she loved fiercely and provided for inconsistently. Harriet was charming and chaotic in equal measure, the kind of woman who filled a room with warmth and then quietly drained your bank account before she left. She never asked for money so much as she arrived at it sideways, through stories of school fees and landlord crises and medical bills, told over the phone in a breathless, urgent voice that made Ella feel that refusing was tantamount to cruelty. Then there was Oliver, 44, the quiet one. Oliver did not make grand schemes. He simply struggled in an ordinary, grinding way. A salaried job that never quite covered his expenses, a wife who spent freely, 2 children in private school because Harriet put the idea in his head that it was the minimum acceptable. Oliver called less often than the others, but when he called, there was a particular apologetic heaviness in his voice that Ella found almost harder to refuse. He always said he hated to ask. He always asked anyway. And then there was Ella, the last born, the miracle child, her mother used to say, born 10 years after Oliver when everyone thought Gloria was done. Ella had grown up watching her siblings fail and her parents struggle, and she had decided somewhere in her adolescent heart that she would not be that story. She would be a different one. She studied harder than anyone expected, got a scholarship, left for university with 1 suitcase and a stubbornness that her mother called pride and Ella called survival. She worked through her undergraduate years, finished a master's degree in management consulting on a partial bursary, and by 28 had co-founded a firm that was turning a profit. By 32, she was a millionaire, not in the aspirational paper valuation way people threw the word around, in the real, liquid, undeniable way. Her family was proud of her. She knew this. She also knew that their pride had very quickly curdled into a sense of entitlement that none of them would have named as such, because in families like theirs, success was always collective. What one person built belonged, at least in spirit, to all of them. Family is everything, her mother said regularly and meaningfully, usually in the context of Ella being asked to give something. Ella believed this. She had wanted to believe it. So she gave. The requests had started early, before the firm was even truly profitable. Reggie called 3 weeks after Ella landed her first major client. He needed capital for the printing business. Not a loan, exactly. He said that word with a small laugh, as if loans were for strangers. More of a contribution, family investment. Ella transferred 400,000 naira that she could not comfortably spare, and told herself it was an investment in her brother's future. He had never mentioned repaying it. Harriet's first call had come around Ella's 31st birthday, which somehow made it worse. Her eldest daughter had admission to a nursing program, and the school fees were due. Ella wired the money the same day because it was her birthday and she wanted to feel generous, and generosity had felt like joy then, before it became something else. Oliver's requests were less frequent but larger, a lump sum for a car that the family needed to get his children to school, then a contribution toward a joint land purchase that somehow became only Ella's responsibility when the others couldn't sort themselves out in time. And then there were the emergencies, the ones that arrived without warning on a Tuesday afternoon or a Sunday morning, medical crises, landlord ultimatums, school suspensions over outstanding fees, funeral contributions, baby shower contributions, Christmas hampers sent on behalf of the family, charged to Ella. Each time she gave. Each time there was relief on the other end of the phone, gratitude sometimes, warm and genuine, and always the refrain, "Thank God we have you. You're the family's backbone. You know family is everything." She had been the backbone. She had not noticed for a very long time that a backbone is never asked how it is doing. It was a Thursday evening in late March when Ella first noticed. She had just completed a wire transfer, 800,000 naira to Reggie, who had presented her with an urgent business opportunity that required immediate capital. She had listened to the details on the phone, typed her banking credentials, and waited for the transaction to confirm. It was not the largest amount she had ever given him. It was not even the largest amount she had given that month. But something about the moment, the quiet of her home office, the soft glow of her laptop, the emptiness of the room around her, made her stop. She sat very still. She thought about the conversation, its length, its content, its conclusion. Reggie had opened with a hello. He had proceeded immediately to the opportunity. He had explained the figures, he had asked, she had agreed, he had thanked her. He had said he would call her back when the thing moved forward. Not once, in 27 minutes of conversation, had he asked how she was. She unlocked her phone and scrolled back through her recent calls. Harriet, 3 weeks ago. Oliver, last month. Her mother, twice in the past 10 days. She tried to remember, across all those calls, whether any of them had asked, really asked, not the performative "how are you" exchanged before getting to the point, whether she was well, whether she was tired, whether she was managing. She could not remember a single instance. Ella was not, by nature, a self-pitying woman. She had always found excessive introspection a luxury she could not afford. But sitting in the quiet that evening, she felt something shift. Not dramatically, not with tears or anger, but with the slow, ground-level movement of a fault line settling. She was not fine, actually. She was exhausted in a way that sleep did not fix. She had been working 70-hour weeks for 2 months on a contract that had expanded beyond its original scope. She had lost 4 kilograms without trying. She had been waking at 3 in the morning with her heart racing over deliverables, team dynamics, client expectations. She had been carrying all of it alone, in the way she always carried things, competently and silently, so that no one felt the need to worry. No one had thought to worry. No one had thought to ask. She sat with this knowledge for a long time. Then she opened her journal, a habit she had kept since university, a plain black notebook she filled with thoughts she trusted no one else with, and she wrote a single line. When did I become a resource instead of a person? She closed the notebook and went to make herself tea she would not finish. She began to pay attention after that, to the texture of the calls, to what was asked and what was not, to the way conversations moved, always and inevitably, toward a need she was expected to meet. She noticed that no one asked about her work beyond its function as a source of funds. No one asked what she found difficult. No one asked whether she liked her life, whether she was lonely, whether there was anyone who took care of her the way she took care of everyone else. She noticed that her mother's calls, which she had always received as expressions of love, were also structured around updates on the siblings, what Reggie needed, what Harriet was going through, what Oliver's situation looked like, as if Ella's role in the family narrative was to receive information about everyone else's struggles so that she might respond to them. Not once had her mother called to ask about Ella's struggles, because in some fundamental way that had never been articulated but was deeply understood by everyone, Ella did not have struggles. Ella had resources. She was the last-born who had reversed the hierarchy, and that reversal had cost her something she was only now beginning to name. She decided to test it. She was not proud of this decision. It felt theatrical, even manipulative, but she needed to know, needed to see it clearly, not through the gauze of love and obligation that had always softened her vision, what exactly she meant to the people she called her family. She constructed the story carefully. A failed investment. One of her portfolio assets had gone under, not unheard of in the current economic climate. The resulting losses had triggered a review of her accounts. Everything was frozen pending audit. She was managing, but it was tight, very tight. She called Reggie first. He was sympathetic. Genuinely, she thought. He said the right things. These things happen, the economy is rough, you'll bounce back. You're Ella. He asked a few questions about the specifics, then the call ended. He did not offer to help. He did not ask what she needed. He said he would pray for her. She called Harriet next. Harriet was more agitated. She could hear the recalibration happening in real time, the mental arithmetic of a woman who had been counting on a particular resource and was now being told it might not be available. The sympathy was there, but underneath it, something tighter. Harriet said, "But you're managing, right? You have savings. You're not you're Ella. You must have something set aside." She was asking, Ella understood, whether there was still something to be had. Oliver sent a text. It said, "Heard about the investment. Hard times. Stay strong." Her mother called 2 days later. By then, word had circulated in the way family news always does, through lateral whisper and careful repetition until everyone has the same version. Her mother said, "Ella, I'm hearing things. Tell me what happened." Ella explained again. Her mother clicked her tongue. Then she said something that Ella would think about for years afterward. "Well, you should have been more careful. You know you're the one we all depend on." No comfort, no inquiry into her daughter's well-being, just the gentle, devastating reminder that her primary value to the family was functional. The calls stopped within 2 weeks. Not gradually, sharply. The weekly check-ins that were really requests in thin disguise, the Sunday calls from her mother that opened with news of the siblings, the forwarded voice notes, the group chat messages, the thinking of you texts that always arrived around the time a bill was due. All of it went quiet. In its place, a silence so complete it had texture. She would sit with her phone on her desk at work and look at it between meetings, this device that used to buzz constantly with the needs of others, and it would lie still for hours. She had not disappeared. She still existed. She was still herself. She simply had ceased to be useful. And that, she understood now with awful clarity, was the only criterion that had ever mattered. She did not cry. She worked. She went to the gym 3 times a week and swam 40 laps each time, her body cutting through the water in long, silent strokes, while her mind processed something it did not have words for. She met Demi for lunch on Fridays and answered her questions carefully, deflecting the ones that cut too close. She read novels she had been meaning to read for years, sitting in her living room with a glass of wine and the peculiar peace of a woman who has been let down so thoroughly that there is nothing left to dread. It was not a good peace, but it was a real one. Let's take a quick pause. I'd love to know, what part of the world are you watching this video from? Leave your reply in the comment section. Let's connect. Also, have you subscribed to this channel yet? If no, kindly hit the subscribe button and like this video. Now, let's get back into the story. Ella had always believed in evidence. She was, at her core, a person who needed to see things twice before she trusted them. Twice in the data, twice in the behavior, twice in the pattern. One instance proved nothing. Patterns told the truth. So she ran 2 more tests. Each one a small, private excavation of the family she had been funding for 15 years. The first, she called Harriet and asked, casually, whether she might come and stay for a few weeks. Things were difficult, she said. She needed a change of environment. She kept her voice light, almost apologetic, the way she imagined someone in genuine need might sound. Harriet's pause was barely a pause at all before the response came. The house was full. Her eldest was visiting with his young family. There was no space in the second bedroom because Harriet had been using it for storage and it was not an estate for guests. Maybe in a few months when things settled. She was sorry. She would pray for Ella. Ella thanked her and ended the call. She sat in her real home, the 4-bedroom house in Lekki Phase 1 that she had paid for herself, that had 3 empty guest rooms, that had never once been offered to Harriet, even though Harriet had benefited from it in every other financial way. And she thought about the geography of generosity, how it moved in one direction, how it always had. The second test was harder to design because it required her to ask for something she had never asked for in her adult life, financial help. She called Reggie, told him she had a hospital bill, nothing dramatic, she said, a procedure she had needed, some tests. Her accounts were still restricted and she was short. Could he help with 200,000 naira? She would pay him back the moment everything was sorted. Reggie cleared his throat. He had his own pressures right now, he said. The business was at a critical point. His children's school fees were due. He wished he could, truly he wished he could, but the timing was just wrong. Could she speak to Harriet? Or perhaps there was an advance she could arrange through work? She called Harriet. Harriet had just paid school fees. She had nothing liquid at the moment. She was sorry. She texted Oliver. He read the message. He did not reply for 2 days. When he did, he sent, "Viv, I want to help, but I'm really stretched right now. I'll try and come back to you." He never came back to her. She did not call her mother. She already knew the answer, and she could not bear to hear it delivered with the particular gentleness of a woman who loved her, but had never once thought of her as someone who might need to be caught. And so her calls went unanswered. Not loudly. No one blocked her number. No one sent sharp words. They simply did not pick up. Or they picked up, made promises, and faded. She became a number in their phones that they did not feel urgency about. She had always been urgent to them. Now that the urgency was reversed, she found out what she had always been worth. Not much. Not in the ways that mattered. She had not meant to get sick. She had thought she was managing the experiment, the revelation, the grief, because that was what it was, even though she had not used that word for it yet. She had thought she was processing it in her usual way, by working, by moving, by keeping the structure of ordinary days intact so that the interior chaos had a container. But the body keeps its own accounts. The exhaustion had been building since February. She recognized it now in retrospect. The heaviness behind her eyes in the mornings, the way her concentration fractured at 4 p.m. no matter how much coffee she had consumed, the headaches she attributed to screen time, the weight she was losing without trying, which she had briefly, foolishly considered a benefit. She had been sleeping 4 to 5 hours a night for months. She had been carrying the weight of the experiment, the grief of it, the loneliness of it, alone in the way she carried everything. And she had been continuing to run a company, manage 42 people, deliver on client contracts, and maintain the exterior of a woman who was, by all appearances, completely fine. She was not fine. On the morning of the collapse, she had arrived at her desk at 7, as usual. By 8, she had cleared a backlog of emails. By 9, she was deep in a financial model that required absolute concentration. By 10:43, something had shifted inside her, a tightening in her chest, a strange blurring at the edges of her vision, a fatigue so sudden and so total that it felt like a hand pressing down from above. She had thought, I should take a break. She had not taken a break. At 10:43, Demi had found her. She came back to consciousness in the corridor outside her office, Demi's hand gripping hers, the sound of sirens already in the distance. She had looked up at the ceiling of the office she had built and felt, through the fog, a very clear thought. This is what it costs. She had not meant it as self-pity. She meant it as reckoning. 3 days in the hospital. The first night Demi had stayed. Dr. Adeyemi came in on the second morning with a look on her face that doctors reserve for patients who are not being honest with themselves about their condition. "You are not as strong as you think you are," Dr. Adeyemi said, not unkindly. "Your body has been giving you signals for months and you've been ignoring all of them. This is your body refusing to be ignored." "I hear you," Ella said. "Do you? Because hearing and doing are different things, and I think you know that." Ella smiled despite herself. "I know that." She had sent the messages to her family from that hospital bed, called them, then texted those who did not answer, kept the messages simple and factual. She was in the hospital, she had collapsed, she was being monitored, and she would appreciate a visit. She had not begged, she had not dramatized, she had simply told the truth in the way she imagined a person told the truth when they needed their family to show up. And she had waited. By the third day, she had stopped waiting. She lay in the thin hospital light and understood something she would spend a long time learning to hold without bitterness. She had spent 15 years being indispensable to people who were not, in the end, essential to her. She had confused obligation for love. She had confused proximity for care. She had built herself into the architecture of other people's lives so thoroughly that she had not noticed she had built no architecture for herself. No one was coming. And the strange thing, the thing she would only articulate to herself months later in the pages of her black journal on a quiet Sunday evening, was that knowing this, really knowing it, was the most clarifying experience of her life. She was discharged on the 4th day with a list of instructions from Dr. Adeyemi that amounted in essence to this: rest, eat, stop carrying the world alone. She went home to the house in Lekki. Demi had arranged for it to be cleaned and stocked with food before she arrived. There were flowers on the kitchen counter, yellow ones from Demi's own garden, and a note that said, "Take the week. I have everything handled. Please sleep." Ella stood in her kitchen for a long time, holding the note, feeling something moved through her that she eventually identified as gratitude. Real gratitude. Not the performed kind she had been on the receiving end of from her siblings all these years, warm in the moment and immediately forgotten, but the deep, structural kind, the kind built on actually showing up. She slept for 11 hours that first night. She slept for 9 the second. She did not check her phone beyond what was necessary. She did not respond to work emails until the 5th day back, and only because Demi had flagged 3 that were genuinely urgent. She read. She cooked simple meals and ate them slowly at the table, which she had not sat at in months. She walked in the mornings along the road near her house, slow walks that had no destination, which was new for her. She had always been a person who walked somewhere. She thought about her family every day, not with anger, or not only with anger, with something more complex. She thought about her mother, who loved her in the way she knew how, but had never once thought of her as someone who might need to be caught. She thought about Reggie, who was not a malicious man, only a man who had been allowed to take without consequence for so long that taking had become his natural mode. She thought about Harriet, who was genuinely struggling in genuine ways, but who had allowed Ella to be her solution instead of her support. She thought about Oliver, quiet Oliver, who had said the least, then perhaps understood the most, and who had still not shown up. She did not excuse them, but she tried to understand them, and there was a difference. Understanding them did not mean continuing. She hired a therapist. This was something she had never done. She had always considered herself too busy, too practical, too skeptical of the process. But Dr. Adeyemi had been firm, and Ella had decided in the hospital that she would try to be a person who listened to things that were true, even when they were inconvenient. The therapist, a composed and perceptive woman named Dr. Fola Briggs, did not offer easy reassurances. In their first session, after Ella had laid out the facts with her usual economy and precision, Dr. Briggs was quiet for a moment before saying, "You describe your family's behavior as a betrayal, but I'm curious about what you expected instead. Did you ever tell them what you needed?" Ella opened her mouth and closed it again. "Not explicitly," she said finally. "I thought it was obvious." "Why?" "Because I had always shown up for them. I assumed they would." "I assumed." "Yes," said Dr. Briggs simply. It was not absolution for her family. It was not blame redirected onto Ella. It was simply a door, quietly opened, to the interior of her own patterns, the way she had given without asking, given without communicating need, given in a way that made her recipients believe she was inexhaustible, because she had never once shown them otherwise. She had made herself impossible to worry about, and then she had been hurt that no one worried. "This doesn't mean what they did is acceptable," Dr. Briggs said in a later session. "It means that you have more agency in redesigning your relationships than you currently believe. You cannot change who they are. You can change what you allow." Ella wrote this down. She carried it for a long time. The recovery took longer than the illness. She had always known, in the abstract, that emotional healing was non-linear. What she had not expected was how much space it would require, literal space. She began, quietly and without announcement, to redesign her life. The first thing she did was move. Not far. She stayed in Lagos, stayed in the same professional orbit. But she found a smaller house, more intentionally chosen, a place where every room had a function she valued and no room was maintained in anticipation of guests who never came. She sold the Lekki house at a profit that would have made a younger version of herself dizzy with satisfaction. She did not tell her siblings. The second thing she did was restructure her giving. She engaged a financial planner who helped her formalize what she had been doing informally for years, except now with actual terms. If any family member needed assistance, there was a process, a conversation, a documented arrangement. It was not coldness. She told herself this and eventually believed it. It was the kind of clarity that prevents resentment from accruing like debt. The third thing, the hardest, was building a circle that was not defined by obligation. She had professional acquaintances in abundance. She had Demi, who had proven herself in every possible way. But she realized, very few people who knew her, not Ella James, the successful consultant, but Ella, the woman who collected obscure jazz records and cried at documentaries about wildlife and was afraid of mediocrity in a way that kept her up at night. She began to invest in friendships with the same intentionality she had always applied to business. She accepted invitations she would previously have declined. She told the truth in social situations rather than performing composure. She was awkward at it, sometimes, and occasionally embarrassed, but she persisted. It did not happen quickly, but slowly, across months, something assembled itself around her. Not a large community, she was still fundamentally a private person, but a real one. People who called to ask how she was and meant it. People who showed up, literally and figuratively, in the small, unremarkable ways that constitute a life. She had not had this before. She had not known what she was missing. She called her mother 6 months after the hospital, not to report in and not to listen to the usual recitation of the siblings' needs. She called to say something she had been composing for months. "Mom, I love you. I want a real relationship with you, but I need you to know that I'm not just your backbone. I'm also your daughter. And if we're going to talk, I need you to ask about me sometimes, not my money, me." There was a long silence. "I didn't know you felt that way," her mother said, finally. Her voice was smaller than usual. "I know," said Ella, "because I didn't tell you. I'm telling you now." Her mother cried a little. Ella let her. Then they talked, really talked, for an hour and a half, in a way they had not talked since Ella was a teenager. It was imperfect and halting, and they would have to keep working at it, but it was a beginning, a real one. She did not make the same call to her siblings. She was not there yet, and she was honest enough with herself not to pretend otherwise. She sent them each a message, brief, warm, without recrimination, that said she was well and hoped they were too, and that she would be in touch when the time felt right. She was not sure the time would ever feel entirely right. She had decided this was acceptable. Word travels in families. It does not need announcements or press releases. It moves through the lateral channels of shared mothers and old school friends and cousins who maintained contact with everyone, and it arrives, eventually, at the right doors. By the time Ella's name appeared again in the family conversations, not as an absence or cautionary tale, but as a woman who was visibly, conspicuously thriving again, she had already been thriving for 8 months. She had not hidden it. She had simply stopped broadcasting it to people who would only see its utility. Reggie called on a Tuesday afternoon. She watched his name appear on her phone screen and felt, to her own mild surprise, very little. Not the old warmth, not the new bitterness, something closer to neutrality. She answered. He was cheerful, expansive. He'd heard she was doing well, a great new contract he'd heard. He was happy for her, truly happy. He had always known she would bounce back. She was Ella, wasn't she? He mentioned, around the 15-minute mark, that he had a new venture, very promising, just needed a little initial capital to get it moving. Ella let him finish. Then she said, "I'm really glad to hear from you, Reggie, and I hope the venture goes well. I'm not in a position to invest right now." A pause. "Oh, right. I heard you were back on your feet." "I am," she said, "but being on my feet doesn't automatically mean funding your ventures. I learned something when I was going through my difficulties. I intend to keep it." Another pause. Then, stiffly, "Of course, I understand." She was not sure he did, but the conversation ended cordially, and she sat with the strange, clean feeling of a woman who had held a line. Harriet came in person, unannounced on a Saturday morning, appearing at the gate of Ella's new home with a gift bag and a wide smile and the energy of someone arriving at a reconciliation they had already scripted. Ella received her in the living room, offered tea, let Harriet go through the motions, the small talk, the compliments about the new house, the careful warm-up of someone building towards something. When she arrived at it, her youngest needed school fees, it was a crisis, she was so embarrassed to ask, she just didn't know who else to turn to. Ella was ready. She said, "I know this is hard to ask, and I love you, but I'm not able to be your first call for this anymore. I think you need to look at your budget and your income and make a plan. If you'd like help thinking through that, I can do that with you, but I'm not going to write a check." Harriet's face moved through several expressions quickly: surprise, hurt, a flicker of indignation, then something that looked almost like the beginning of respect. "You've changed," Harriet said. "Yes," Ella said. "I have." They drank their tea. Harriet left for an hour. She had not received what she came for. She had received something else, a sister who was honest with her, possibly for the first time. Whether Harriet would know what to do with that, Ella could not say, but she had offered it. That was its own thing. Oliver sent a letter, an actual letter, handwritten in the careful script he had inherited from her father. He said he had been thinking about everything. He said he was sorry, not with the vagueness of a person apologizing for the weather, but with specific acknowledgement of the specific moment he had read her text in the hospital and done nothing. He said he did not expect forgiveness immediately. He said he wanted to do better. It was the most honest thing any of her siblings had ever put in writing to her. She read it 3 times. Then she wrote back, not an absolution, but an opening. She said she appreciated his honesty. She said she was open to rebuilding something real if we both committed to honesty over convenience. She said it would take time. She meant all of it. A year after the hospital, Ella James sat at a table she had chosen for herself in a restaurant she liked, across from 2 friends she had known for 18 months and trusted completely. They were celebrating nothing in particular. Her friend, Adeze, had suggested it. Just an evening, just because. The other, Simone, had rearranged a work commitment to be there. These were small things. They were not small things. She had eaten well. She had laughed twice in the way that catches you off guard. She had mentioned without calculation or performance that she had been tired lately, and both women had turned to her immediately and asked questions, real ones with follow-up, and she had felt the extraordinary, ordinary experience of being seen. This is what she had never had, she understood now. Not the wealth, not the professional success, not even the family. She had had those in various measures. What she had lacked was this: people who looked at her and wanted to know what was actually there. She was building that now. It was slower than building a business and less legible to the outside world, but it was real, and she trusted it in a way she had not trusted much before. She thought of her siblings sometimes, not with the old ache, but with something more measured. She had kept her word. She had stayed open. She and Oliver were in careful, halting correspondence. She had dinner with her mother once a month, and those dinners were becoming something she looked forward to rather than endured. Harriet surprised her once, called 3 months after the living room conversation to say that she had found a financial advisor and was working on a plan. She had not asked for money. She had asked how Ella was. It was a beginning. Reggie had not called again after the Tuesday conversation. She held space for the possibility that he might, one day, when he had run out of other options and was forced to confront something more true about himself. She also held space for the possibility that he never would. Both possibilities were acceptable. She had stopped needing a particular outcome from him. Needing particular outcomes from people who were not willing to meet them, she had learned, was the surest way to stay in pain. Walking home that evening through the warm, early night air of the city that had always moved too fast for her to stop in, she thought about the woman she had been 12 months ago, the woman in the hospital bed, alone, certain she had lost everything. She had not lost everything. She had lost the illusion of things she had never truly had, and in the space that the illusion left behind, something more durable had grown. She did not know yet the full shape of the life she was building. She knew it would include her mother, carefully, Oliver, tentatively, perhaps Harriet in time in a new configuration, perhaps others she had not yet met.